Hi, everybody. My name is Ferial Haffajee with the Daily Maverick, and we are delighted to be with you today for the final live journalism event. And what a book to end on. The Unlikely Mr. Rogue, a book by Evelyn Groenink, a very well-known journalist who has published 5 books, mostly in South Africa and the rest of Africa, but also from Amsterdam, where she, I think, takes a very global view of things. Congratulations, Evelyn, on this book. And it is a book about Ivan Pillay. Ivan Pillay is an activist of more than 30 years standing in South Africa, a guerrilla, an MK commander, a SARS executive, and also somebody who has really come through the fire with this rogue unit saga. So very welcome to both of you. Congratulations on a book that is very much about, and perhaps written by both of you, although Evelyn is the professional journalist and writer in the family. So she's put it all together and put it together very well. So my colleague Judith February, who is going to do the webinar and can't be with us today, sadly, asked this first question, Evelyn. The book interweaves both your stories in a very sensitive and sometimes even humorous manner. And I'll add here, it's a complex narrative because it goes from past to present, back to past, and it's told in different places, spaces, and times, but you do it very, very well. So how did you decide on interweaving both the voices and both the stories?
There were 2 elements to that decision. One was the very clear fact that Ivan's story had to be told, a 30-year story from MK guerrilla to somebody who is maligned as an agent of white monopoly capital. Yes. But I always say that I would have written a book anyway, because the last 30 years of South Africa are incredibly significant. To me, South Africa has always been the country where the most contradictions and conflicts in the world, everything comes together in South Africa: black, white, poor, rich, tradition, modernity, women, men, and everything in between. And I've always been fascinated by that, because together with that enormous challenge and together with that enormous trauma, you also get the highest ideals, the highest aspiration, as symbolized by the Constitution, and before that by the ANC's Freedom Charter. So that tension between, we have such high ideals and we have such enormous contradictions, and then how that pans out over 30 years, that just had to be written too.
And that's very much a theme of this book, the story of South Africa. But I guess what has made it quite easy for me to read quickly after Judith couldn't join us today is that it is a love story. And I love a good love story. And it's a story of a wonderful relationship. I first met the two of you at the Rand Club at one of the big investigative journalism awards, and then was introduced to Ivan as your partner, and then afterwards have come to know him in ways that we'll get to. But perhaps share a little bit about that story, either of you. Where did you meet, and what is it that drew each other to you at times that weren't always easy, as the beginning parts of the book tell us, eh?
Ivan, do you want to say something about that?
You go ahead. I'll supplement.
Okay. Look, I'm in Lusaka in 1990 with all these highfalutin ideals. I come from the Dutch anti-apartheid movement. I start reporting on South African issues and you know, the future we see for South Africa. I meet Ivan, who comes into this, you know, from his perspective as a former underground and struggle operative. And we get into all these conversations about how are we going to do it better than what happened in Eastern Europe? Is it possible to even do social justice, with bearing in mind that things have gone so wrong in other countries, even in Nicaragua, you know, that was the second best thing just before that. And Ivan came to this from an acute awareness of the enormous challenges. Ivan was never euphoric. He always knew that this is a damaged country with people who have gone through incredible trauma, be it exile or prison or just, being told by some white conductor in a train to undress in front of your family, normal, ordinary South Africans who never did anything wrong or never opposed or never joined any struggle were also traumatized and scarred by violence and humiliation. And so Ivan was acutely aware of this. And from that conversation and occasionally some whiskey grew a bond.
I must say, okay, I'll add a little bit if I may. So these two revolutionaries, I think both people with a vision of a future that is communist in the best senses of the word. I think you meet each other in Lusaka and that revolutionary instinct draws you together, but it's not the easiest of early lives. Ivan is in the underground. At a difficult time for the struggle against apartheid. So you meet in Amsterdam, you meet in Lusaka, I think you meet in Swaziland as well, and then you begin an early life in Yeovil, and we'll come back to that. But what I do want to look at is the title of the book, and I guess the reason that we're joined by 315 people at this point is it's The Unlikely Mr. Rogue, A Life with Ivan Pillay. And in here, Evelyn, you do it so beautifully with love and with humor, is that you obviously want to retrieve the reputation of your partner, your husband here, whose name has been dragged through the mud. And what you tell us is, come on, this guy is not a rogue character. In fact, he makes us check our tires every time we go out and be really carefully. And he's a meticulous man. So in your Amsterdam apartment, things are lying wild. I can just see a journalist's apartment. And Ivan's home is like, everything is neat and tidy. So this is not a roguish character, right? This is not someone who breaks rules.
No, he's not. He's a total goody two-shoes. He's always tried to be best and do best, even though the term "be best" has been contaminated by Melania Trump. But he's the opposite of that. He's always tried to be good and do good. That's Gandhi, a much better one to quote.
Was Gandhi an inspiration for your early activism, or was it more Oliver Tambo and Nelson Mandela who brought you from a life that was always conscious but then became revolutionary?
Look, I owe a lot to my family, working class family, from Durban. The normal matchbox type houses. I had a very stable childhood. We didn't have much, but we had enough. My mother was a very caring person, very generous person. So we quite easily developed empathy for other people, and it wasn't for me a sharp change to start getting involved in the community, and we started doing community work. The politics developed within it and without it. But primarily, we got involved in community to do the right thing. And apartheid being what it was, it always got in the way. So apartheid was the best politicizer. And in fact, for the ANC, the best recruiter for the ANC was apartheid. So if you are somebody that's genuinely trying to do the right thing, you're going to bump your head and you're going to develop deeper political ideas. I was conscious of Gandhi, and I joined the Congress NIC in about 71, 72, the revived NIC. We became conscious of the ANC, not so much of our Tambo, but of Nelson Mandela.
Okay.
There were a few banned books around. And what we read appealed to us. It's non-racialism, it's inclusivity, appeals. And then we were hooked into it. And in many ways, you know, the ANC of those days, and I mustn't say it in a way that distorts it, but you had the sense of being in a family. Your life depended on each other. And when you were doing things with care, you're actually doing it because you cared also about other people. That is it in short.
Sure. So from there you go into exile from your early days as an activist, Swaziland, Lusaka, you go overseas for various training. You come back and you work in internal audit at the ANC. That must have been interesting. And then later join the TEC. And then you find yourself at SARS as part of a new order. How did you understand that role politically? And if you could share with us just a little bit about the rebuilding of SARS, of which you were a key part.
Yeah. Look, we as Evelyn said earlier, I'm always conscious that there's a huge burden of history.
Yes.
This is a very divided country. It will take, and I think I've said it before, almost a superhuman effort to get these things right. I was conscious that that the government had announced some good programs at that stage, at that early stage, and that government needed these programs to be funded. And maybe SARS is the place that could offer me a purpose. I'd worked for about 2.5, 3 years in intelligence, and I didn't enjoy it in the sense that much of our intelligence is still focused on political intelligence rather than all the other risks that need to be managed. And really, there's not too much of value. In some respects, especially during Zuma years, it was a negative value. And I saw SARS as a place where you could do things, you can get things done. And you could see what you're doing. When we got there, and obviously Minister Gordhan being there was also a big attraction. And when we got there, we then also attracted other people who knew us. And of course, through due process, they came on board. Also Shabalala, and Dipu, and Velase, and so on. These are people who were in the ANC underground. Now, we were very clear that, you know, we've got to build an inclusive SARS. There's a place for everybody. And we needed to enunciate this very, very clear purpose, which Pravin Gordhan did very well. He coined the phrase for us of a higher purpose.
Oh.
And that was the big vision, the pull that it gave to all of us. But underlying it, is the basic propositions of the Freedom Charter. Inclusive, pull people together. You don't have to go out of your way to isolate people who are problematic. They actually isolate themselves. I think there are some very important things, and that is that we knew that values mattered. That we should pull people into SARS who had the right values, the right pattern of behavior. It took us some time, 7-8 years, before you actually develop the right models and tools to measure these things. And most of us who were there, we are evidence-based people. We want to see the facts. We want to be able to measure things. We want to analyze things. So I think it sets us apart from lots of other people. We didn't just issue slogans. We didn't just make announcements. We did things. And we learned very fast from our own mistakes, yes, but we learned very fast from abroad. I mean, there are revenue services all over the world. Some have been existing for 50 years, 100 years, 200 years. And we used their models. We had very good relationships with them. I mean, Pravin Gordhan was for 10 years the chairman of the World Customs Organization. We chaired the Global Tax Forum for three years. That was the standing of the institution. So we learned. And what the models that they use worked for us. Of course, we had to tweak it. We had to apply it to our own situations. But things like the compliance model has application far beyond tax when you want to build compliance in the citizen.
Excellent. So I want to just tell you that we are 352 people with us, and many of them are your friends. So I'm just going to say hello to some of them. Hi, Dirk Hartford, David Seif, Klaus Schmidt says, what a difference it makes to hear and see Ivan live after reading so much about him from Jacques Spa in the media. Craig Kruger, Anthony Butler, we see you. Great question. We will come to it. Jonas Malchas. Helga Putik, thank you. Nawal Ramasar, good to see you. Buni Sehwali, Nkosani Sibui, felicitous greetings. Brenda Gunning, welcome. Nkosana Sibui, Tebogo Seretlo, Faisal Bayat, Ruth Katz, Andre Groenewald, Junaid Waja, David Seif, Kanta Padiachi, Zora Dawood says, Ivan Pillay is vindicated again and again. Sheikhs Modi, good morning to all. Lots of your friends on here. We look forward to chatting with more of you. Alfred Jacobs joins us from South Carolina. Ethel Williams in Cape Town. I said Alfred Jacobs, Graham Bell. Very welcome to all of you. So Ivan, you sketch for us and Evelyn, I'll come to you in a moment. I remember that period very well, where SARS was kind of the shining light of public administration. The tax revenue numbers go up, and SARS begins to thank us for paying our tax. And I remember feeling, this is odd. They've made me quite like paying my tax, the compliance model at work. So then, how do you feel, Ivan? Carol Steinberg says, hello, Ivan. So good to hear your voice. So good that your voice is now out there. So how did you feel, Ivan, when you wake up on that Sunday morning and the Sunday Times, because Sunday Times is a very powerful newspaper. At the time, I think it was selling maybe 400,000 copies. It sets the agenda. They say exposed SARS rogue unit. And that goes on, I think, for 18 different editions, or you know the numbers. How does that morning strike you? And Evelyn, please join in after Ivan.
35. I'm told it was 35.
35. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Evelyn.
I just before that, I just want to say hello to Judge Krigler.
Is he on as well? Good.
Yes.
Me too.
Look, I think I should start by saying that we were already aware by about 2009, 2010. There were serious problems in state institutions. And in the book, you will see some reference to it, but we tried to do quite a bit to help other state institutions. I mean, at the time of the World Cup, the Home Affairs system to process entry and exit collapsed. And SARS stepped in, and we had 3 months, and we built a system for Home Affairs, and we helped them manage the system. And it built a reputation with Home Affairs that was lasting. That collapsed, of course, only when we left there. And that relationship, made a lot of sense because, you know, we both at the board. And that relationship developed primarily through the DG Apleni and Barry Hall, who was our chief operating officer. The two teams met every Wednesday after office hours, normally from about 5 to about 9. And there were many other things. In fact, even the conceptualizing of the ID cards that we have today was done jointly by SARS. We did work for the government employees pension fund. We did work in the Eastern Cape Health Department. Because we had developed in a way in which we had a fair understanding of why it worked in SARS, why it was not working elsewhere. So when we talk about these blows at SARS, it's just not at SARS. It is actually all attempts to be constructive and to build something lasting in this country. Now, SARS actually hasn't been new to controversy. There have been attempts to launch campaigns against SARS from the early 2000s. But through the good work that we did, through good organization and good media management, and good political management, we've managed to keep that at bay. We failed when we began to get into an environment that was permissive. Anybody could say anything, and politicians were only too happy to hear whispers about somebody else. And it's an unfortunate thing, and we're paying the cost for that now. The facts don't matter. What matters is, can I utilize what is being offered to advance myself? Unfortunately, that is how many people look at things. Now, we of course know, and even now social science tells us, you actually make your decision and you rationalize right later. So we have actually less agency than you think we have. Anyway, so because in this permissive environment, the groups of people that we alienated for one reason or another was growing. And there are different groups. There are ex-employees of SARS. I think we were one of the few institutions. We took disciplinary steps. We got rid of people. Tax evaders, politicians, fixers. We have this phenomenon of fixers who sell their political connections. And they're able to do things. In SARS, they were not able to do it. Quite often we talk about the people must have integrity, people mustn't be corrupt. All of that is true, but you've got to design your institution and your system such that it keeps people honest. So one of the basic design features under Pravin Gordhan is that whereas the initial receiver of revenue, each office was a receiver of revenue, where every function took place. We redesigned that to have a front office and a back office and an enforcement center. What that meant is that the taxpayer and the taxpayer representatives couldn't directly reach auditors and investigators, people who were dealing with files. And that system worked very well. It worked very well because if you do that, you must have a very good communication between the front office and back office. Otherwise, you can just frustrate the hell out of people. And then another thing we did is that we required tax advisors to be registered, licensed. So not any Tom, Dick, and Harry can say, I'm a tax advisor, and go around promoting the abuse of the tax system. So these are many things that are done to get things right. So beyond the higher purpose and the values, you've got to build a whole system that supports this thing, that makes it easier to do the right thing and makes it difficult to do the wrong thing. So when the blow came, we were expecting it. And you'll see in the book, it will say that we got warning. We got signs that these dossiers were doing their round. Some were getting to the president, the then president.
Is that President Zuma? I just want to get our presidents right then. Huh?
Yes.
Okay.
We're aware of mobilization that is going on. And every time we took on people that are closer and closer to the politicians, they would tell us they're in touch. I spoke to so-and-so, and they said they know you and that you help us. So you always continuously you get this, continuously. But we always kept to it. I mean, I remember people telling me that, look, I donated 20 million rand to the ANC. I said, looking for the ANC. It doesn't change. It doesn't change anything. So we accumulated over time lots of people who had an interest in us not being there.
So you made enemies, huh?
Yeah. So let me, one thing I want to finish is that, so I was aware of this. We were aware of it. And we spent hours trying to manage this. Between Adrian, Johan, Minister Gordhan, myself, others, we spent hours managing. I've discussed it with the then President Zuma, where he denied that he was part of these things and so on. So, I mean, it became so apparent that I did say on more than one occasion, I said it to the president, and I said it to more than one occasion to the new commissioner of SARS, Mr. Moyani, I'm ready to leave. Just tell me and I'll be gone. I won't like it, but we don't want the institution to be broken. So for me, the saddest part of this is not that we're not there, some of us. It's actually that people wanted, or perhaps they don't know how to do things other than to break the institution. And at that time, institutions around SARS was in trouble. The NPA was in trouble. Most institutions were already in serious trouble. So for me, that's the saddest part. That there was something that was built. I mean, we say it often of a tax agency that it's the goose that lays the golden egg. But the thing that I didn't understand then, and really up to now, it's very difficult for me to understand. Why do you have to take a hammer to an institution? I'll make one last point. I think Evelyn is making a point. That when we started this unit, and by the way, it's 27 odd people that we started with, out of 3,000 people that were in enforcement.
What is its name? What was its proper name?
High Risk Investigative Unit.
27 people.
Yes, initially it went through a number of name changes, and then right at the end it was 7 people. We kept reducing it and moving people to other parts of SARS. When you, this is the part also, I think, it's the part and parcel of this why break an institution, is that if you're sitting on an institution and you know it's a world-class institution, or maybe you don't believe it, but you think it's propaganda, but let's say if you know
yes,
that it's world-class. And here's a problem that's supposed to be created around 27 people initially, and then 7 people. How do you go about dealing with it? Let's say it was a real problem. How do you go about dealing with it? And surely that is the first failure. The first failure is problems will happen. Problems will happen. How do you deal with the problem? Do you actually make it into a big mountain and crush the institution? Or do you deal with it, with surgical precision? And in all our discussions about so far, it is something that's not engaged with. If there was a real problem, how do you deal with it? How do you ring fence it? You say, okay, I don't want this to contaminate everything else, and then let's go into this, and let's weigh what was supposed to be wrong about it, what impact did it have. So this sense of proportionality, balance, again, it's difficult to understand, unless, of course, as we surmise, because of all these accumulating people that are dissatisfied with us, they come together, they build a huge conspiracy, and they see us as a huge threat to their present and their future. That's the only thing that can account for, taking a wrecking ball to a world-class institution.
Thank you. That was very powerful. I just have to read for you some of the things people have been saying. I'll get to questions, and Evelyn, coming to you. From Walter Ehrlich, a shining example of humble, strategic, and ethical leadership. Derek Maurice, we so clearly need more Ivan Pillays in positions of authority. Shawneen Proctor, a Pillay of strength. I like that one. Andre Foster, fascinating discussion. What a pillar of clear strategic thinking is Mr. Pillay. almost lost to us. Will the current SARS management recover to the erstwhile position of being a guiding light in the public public service? Ambassador Shirish Soni, who is very active on the chat, lovely to have you with us. Is it worth OUTA launching a class action case against independent media and their disgraced journalists on behalf of everyone they targeted? We come a bit more to the media. And the final one, hello, Ivan Yusuf Jardine. I don't think that SARS got enough credit from the general public for the way the archaic SARS processes were re-engineered. Absolutely fabulous work that that you and your colleagues did. Well done. Malcolm Pannell, everyone in the country has benefited from Ivan's work. Those who know him have the benefit of getting to witness integrity in action. Thank you, Ivan. And there's many more like that. So really honored to be here with you today. Evelyn, so your husband doesn't speak about personal impacts. But what was the cost of those 35 articles on your lives and on the wider circle of your Lisa Piquet, of other people who got caught in the rogue unit saga?
It was very bad I think it was mostly very bad for, the people who were actually targeted, like Ivan and Yolisa and a number of others. They suffered, and as a wife, you experience that the husband is terribly frustrated and would like to speak but can't, not because he doesn't want to, but because he's muzzled by all kinds of disciplinary and suspension rules and so on. And then you get these idiot journalists who are not worthy of the name journalist, who phone or send SMSs on a Saturday, publishing Sunday, and they know he's not allowed to talk. And even if he talks, they won't even quote him. So that's terribly frustrating. But I must say, personally for me, I must say the daughters also suffered. Yeah. They had this idea that we are part of a good thing, a good family, have a good place in this South Africa, and they were all excited about, the experiment, the South African experiment, and the role their father played in it, and me as an observer. Me as a journalist, it was so schizophrenic, because I can't remember actually suffering beyond the point that, because it's your husband who is the target, of course you also feel that. But as a journalist, I found it frightfully interesting. And if I talk from the point of view of a journalist who's been an activist and at some point a communist, I always sort of knew theoretically that this happens. The revolution eats its own children, and of course the bad forces are going to strike back, and they want to create this new unaccountable elite that drives around in the Mercedes-Benzes, the Wabenzi, as Chris Hani called them. That's going to happen. So when it happened, I was not so much aware of what Ivan talks about, even though he did say a thing or two every now and then, the dossiers and the gossip. That sort of didn't impact on me. I'm a bit slow on the uptake when it comes to those things. But theoretically, I always knew that there was going to be this backlash, and that we were going to get this new corrupt, crooked elite fighting tooth and nail to revert gains for the majority. So when it happened, in a way, I thought, okay, so there we have it. And in a way, things became more interesting for me. Because to tell you the truth, it also played a small part. When Ivan was seen by those at SARS as a big shot, deputy commissioner, acting commissioner, you get these people who want to ingratiate themselves. And now I'm the wife of the acting commissioner and the deputy commissioner. So I was not all.
Did they ask you to do things about their tax as well? That must have been fun.
Oh my God! In the book, I also write about how I get to have to attend dinners, and some people referring to me as Madam Deputy Commissioner or Madam Acting Commissioner. And I hated it. So in a way, I was much more in my element as a journalist later on, even though it was terrible for the country.
In our earlier conversation, and Ethel Williams says, wow, this concept of the revolution eating its children. Earlier you said that South Africa is this kind of microcosm of all the big global tensions in the world. And you said that you feel like we have going through a counter-revolution. Could you just expand on that? And it is in the book. I mean, you do analyze the moment as well as dealing with the personal issues, huh?
Well, I don't know if counter-revolution is the right term, because it is a contaminated term. It is also used by the likes of Julius Malema and fellow not very bright people. They call everybody who is against them counter-revolutionaries, and Ivan and I have been called counter-revolutionaries. So let's try and stay away from that term. But what I mean by that is that you have a social justice aspiration and you have a tax service that is sort of a Robin Hood inspired thing, take from everyone according to affordability and give to everyone, that is what people often don't understand when you talk about institutions and a tax agency. I don't know what they see when you say those words. They see buildings, offices, bureaucrats. That's not what it is. It's money for clinics and medicines that get to clinics, and schools that actually have proper functioning toilets that keep functioning and are not abandoned after the project people took their money and then, months later they don't work again and you're back to pit toilet. It's all those things. And then you know that people don't want money to be spent in that way. They want all the money for themselves, because now we must have money. And that's the continuing refrain of the crowd that is referred to as the radical economic transformation people. The only transforming that they want is for money to be given to them.
That's interesting. Thank you.
And if you want to call that a counter-revolution, I don't know, for want of a better word, that's what it was and is.
Thank you. So I have quite a few questions here. I've now summarized them on the people who slipped through the net. There's one, Gareth Stead, for example, asks about Mark Liffman. You know Mark Liffman of Western Cape. There's Brett Kibble. So generally, it's like, was SARS even-handed, I guess? And then if you could answer that quickly, because I do want to talk about this week's judgment. We have questions about that as well. So Mark Thomas says, Mr. Pillay, if SARS succeeded in keeping the lobbyists, the fixers at bay, how then did Brett Kibble slip through the tight ship? Quite a few questions.
He did not read the book. I think he did not read the book. There's a whole lot of Brett Kibble in the book. But okay.
Please, Ivan.
Look.
He must buy the book.
As time went on in SARS, we got better and better at what we were doing. I think what people should appreciate is that the universe of those who want to evade tax or pay less tax or not to be registered for tax, it's a vast universe. What would make the work of the tax person easier is to have a good regulatory regime in the country. Then the tax system leverages off the regulatory system of the country. It becomes very, very difficult when the border is porous or the borders are porous. It becomes very difficult if the CIPC, I don't know what's it called these days, but it should be the registration of companies. Yeah. If it's not efficient, if the equivalent of the financial standards board is not efficient, it makes it very, very difficult. So it's actually one interlocking system. The enforcement is a very expensive capability. There are not many people around with the experience to play in that field, and we'll always have less resources than the other side. So what we developed as an enforcement model is what we term the breadth, the depth, and leverage. So breadth, you need to touch enough people so that the perception is there that you can be touched by SARS. And by definition, that touch is a relatively light touch. It's a desk audit, it's an inquiry, etc. Or it's somebody may come to your premises if you're a small business and examine your registration certificates, etc. So that's the light touch. The depth is that where you have serious non-compliance, that we have the capability to deal with those issues in great depth. And the third is leverage, that in the way we do this breadth and the depth, you can leverage by concentrating on particular segments, by utilizing the media, by utilizing, for example, the housing authority, by utilizing SICA, professional associations, etc. You multiply the impact that you have. There will be people there were people that did get through from time to time. Mark Liftman didn't get through. In fact, the same unit that they call the rogue unit was on, together with other people in SARS, was on top of Mark Liftman. And Mark Liftman is one of the people that complained that we are creating problems.
Who did he complain to?
To politicians. And you will note that around 2013, 2014, he attended the ANC's birthday party in Cape Town. And you'll note that there was this meeting, 2 meetings with gangsters, one in Durban and one in Cape Town.
Wasn't one of those meetings allegedly with the former President Jacob Zuma?
Both of them.
Okay.
He was present in both. So the Kebble thing came to us late. It was being handled somewhere in SARS, but it was being handled actually by 2 auditors in Mpumalanga. And as Kebble became a name a bigger name in the media, and more people came to know about it, we looked at what the people in Mpumalanga did, and they didn't do much. And it would be very difficult. It is something that we had to pull to the head office. We pulled it to the head office. And in the end, I think we got something like 50 million, but that was after Kebble died or was killed. But we continued with the matter, and we went after the people who were also involved in the killing of Kebble, and we sequestrated all of them. By then already, we were making more use of the civil action, because the criminal prosecution was still very, very problematic.
Didn't they give them indemnity, those ones?
We also went after Kebble Senior. So we may not have been as fast onto Kebble as we should have. That's possible. But when we became aware of it, we went after it. What didn't help us is the 2 auditors from Mpumalanga then went around saying, okay, we did this in order to kill the Kebble kids. We actually didn't. We did it in order to pull it to head office and to support it.
Yolisa tells us the Liftman case, Yolisa Pique tells us, the Liftman case continues in the courts, it didn't slip through. Evelyn, if I could ask you, this week there was a humdinger of a judgment in the North Gauteng High Court, which really took apart the public protector's findings on the alleged rogue unit. What do you think of that judgment? Ivan, obviously I'd like you to come in too, but I just want to get Evelyn's thoughts, because the book drops and then judgment comes out almost the the next week. Eh?
Yeah, nice of them to give us publicity.
Yes.
Look, we hoped for this. We didn't know that the judges were going to be as clear as they were. Gosh, were they clear? Incompetent, and I don't think they used the word malicious, but it's pointing in that area. And and they come with evidence. Like Ivan says, we need evidence-based, fact-based argumentation, and their judgment is full of evidence and facts. And what I liked was that you get the RET brigade, the crowd that tries to keep going with the rogue unit narrative. They say that, see, now the judges are also part of the conspiracy.
Yeah.
So you get this response where everybody who actually gets convinced by facts and evidence is now also part of the rogue unit. So this rogue unit that doesn't exist now, and that was an investigative unit of 7 people when we last counted, is become like a metaphor for everybody who has like a mind, who can look at facts and evidence. Peter Ampedi made this cabal list of all the journalists who are part of the rogue unit cabal, and I think you are on it, I am on it, yeah. All of us are on it. So they make themselves smaller and smaller, and they make their enemy bigger and bigger and bigger. Now everybody who is good, in my view, good in South Africa is part of the rogue unit, which is actually a victory beyond measure.
I mean, just to share with you is that at that time, the pace of documents falling into our newsrooms, because I was editing City Press then, was urgent. And it was quite hard to explain to some colleagues that this wasn't a scoop, that this was we didn't have the language at the time, that this was mis and disinformation, and it was coming from somewhere. It was really quite difficult to do that. So Ivan, is vindication important to you? I mean, was this judgment an important one, or is it just part of a long string of putting facts into the public domain? I mean, does it matter to you?
Yeah, look, it matters. I think it's a major milestone. I don't think we're over, because unfortunately, we can see that the governing party is itself in serious trouble, and we don't have a pace setting of norms and standards that say this is the right things, this is the right way to do things, this is wrong. We don't have an active setting of standards, but it's an important milestone. Yolisa always says that every time this matter is taken to a legal forum, a court, those who have made all these allegations, they've almost always lost, or at least they've always lost. And usually, what they do, what they say, is an assertion, and usually it is they've decided the person X is a problem. We've got to get person X out, and we've got to get rid of him. And in fact, it's quoted in the book. The then Minister of Public Enterprises.
Or
is it Lynn Brown or Malusi Gaba?
Lynn Brown said it to say that you guys are going to be targeted, and you're going to be
smeared
and hounded out of SARS.
Wow!
So that you'll never work again.
Yeah. So of course it's an important milestone, but we have, my view, we have a long way to go. But of course it's complicated because we've got to fix the politics. We've got to fix our institutions. And within institutions, we've got to fix systems. Systems are broken. But it's an important milestone, and we're thankful for all the people that have supported us. And I hope it becomes easier now to do the right thing.
Thank you. I would also refer people who are interested to a 3-part series that Ivan Pillay and Yolisa Piquet, with somebody else, name forgot, have written in the Daily Maverick. So a linked question, Evelyn, I think it may be our last one, from Anthony Butler. To what degree did the management of corruption in the exile ANC affect how corruption was managed after 1994? And if I could just add, you write a little bit about the former President Jacob Zuma in exile, just if you could give some sense of how he emerges in the book.
Well, I think Ivan should take that question, but I can talk about what is said about Zuma in the book. I raised a question that has raised by quite a few people, that how can somebody be a struggle hero and then turn out to be corrupt? Is it just that power corrupt, or what happens to these people? From the book, I see you can glean, and I don't know this firsthand, but I have Ivan's experiences and other people. He was never a good person. And I think Ivan can take it from there.
Well, previously I've reported that Ivan went to the former President Jacob Zuma 3 times to get him to fix his tax affairs. I won't ask you about that because you're not allowed to speak about it. But if you could, Ivan, take the Anthony Butler question on: to what degree did the management of corruption in the exiled ANC affect how it was managed after 94? It's a big question, but we only have like a minute before we have to ring off. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Look, we've got to understand the ANC operated in small pockets. And we're spread out over, 25, 30 countries. And even in those small pockets, we all had separate units. So there was a sense of we were one big organization, and we supported one philosophy. But the way we managed the everyday activities was in small compartments. And the opportunity for large-scale corruption amongst cadres was very low. We were not in that environment. I mean, we lived in an environment where we got groceries at the end of the month for the next year. And when it became difficult to give people groceries because of security, then we would get a food allowance. In Lusaka, we got food and clothing, and we got a 14 kwacha allowance for smoking and so on. 14 kwacha, not even 1 rand. So the opportunity amongst the rank and file was hardly any opportunity there for corruption. There might have been corruption at a higher level. I was not there to actually know and see that. But I would say that being in a liberation movement the way we were in little pockets doesn't prepare you for running big institutions, and doesn't prepare you in itself for running quite a sophisticated economy and country. And by the way, apartheid didn't prepare us either. Apartheid wasn't a good thing. It didn't prepare us. We couldn't in 1994 suddenly have been prepared to govern a sophisticated country. We didn't have the tools. We didn't have the knowledge. There's no problem with that. If you acknowledge that, then you learn. And I think the big difficulty was that we wanted to pretend that we knew, and we didn't.
Thank you. So this is a fabulous book, The Unlikely Mr. Rogue. It's been wonderful to be with both of you. I hope it sells like hotcakes and that you have a good holiday season. I just want to end with a quote from Yolisa Piquet, who is someone who was also at SARS and whose name has also been dragged through the mud. And he says, the Rogue Unit is South Africa's answer to the Loch Ness Monster. It's cited everywhere. It's seen by none, but it lurks in the shadows. I hope that the judgment puts the end to that, and good luck. I really recommend this lovely love story, but also incisive political treatise. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, Ivan. Have a good holiday.
Thank you. You too.
All the people who attended.
Thank you.